Hey guys, I want to welcome you to another episode of the Advisory Board podcast, where we bring in experts from the franchising community and business community to teach you best practices and how to build a franchise that's going to last, responsibly franchise, and successfully grow. I've got with me today Don Shin, who's a friend of mine and who's somebody who I've grown to really respect a lot in the franchise development community. If you don't mind, Don, I'm going to brag on you for just a second, but
Okay.
welcome to the
Thanks.
podcast.
Thanks. I'll get red. I'll get red. I don't,
Yeah.
it's in color, so.
Yeah, you can turn off your video for a second if you need to. It's really embarrassing. But so, guys, the reason I want Don on to share some insights with us today is I mean, not only does he's kind of got the best of both worlds. 23 years of Fortune 500 experience building, leading teams, exiting that, and then getting into franchising. So he's got a story and an experience that's very relevant to a lot of people who are, the corporate refugee folks trying to get out, get into franchising. But he's been, man, for years. He's owned three master franchise territories with Action Coach. Ended up being the CEO there for 3 years. Is that right, Don?
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And then he's the founder CEO of FBE, the Franchise Building Experts. They specialize in helping people master the funnel in franchise development, develop better candidates, award more franchises. Anything bow to Stern in franchise development is kind of their area of expertise. Strategic partner to BAI, which is awesome, to help coach and train franchise consultants to do things right. And on the personal note, I love this. Speaks Japanese, spent a lot of time overseas, and he's super involved in local church community men's groups. Has been a chaplain of a AA baseball team. Currently, the chaplain of an AHL hockey team, right? The Hershey Bears.
Yep. Yep. That's
And
fun. Yeah.
I love that. So,
Calder Cup champions. Just want to be clear. The equivalent of the Stanley Cup in the AHL.
nice. So, I mean, not to flex, but they were inspired deeply before they played that last game. I'll bet.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. And last but not least, actually, in fact, probably most important, married for 45 years, a couple of grown kids and 7 grandchildren. So, guys, a man of a lot of integrity, but also very talented. And tell us a little bit more about you, Don, maybe FBE, just so people get a little bit more feel of your area of expertise and why I might have you on here.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. First of all, really, really thanks for having me. Yeah, I'd say about a year and a half ago, I mean, this has been going on for years, but I think a year and a half ago, it really hit me that I really wanted to make an impact, a bigger impact in the franchise development space, in the franchise sales space. Really wanted to help people more clearly, help their candidates, help their prospects into the right franchises. If they're consultants or franchisors, be sure they've got the right people, as opposed to, the old franchise joke about, hey, if they walk upright on 2 legs, can fog a mirror, and they have enough money, I'll sell them the franchise. I wanted to get away from that. And I just didn't see a lot of training for franchisors, reps. Certainly, all the broker organizations have their own training for affiliates or for consultants. However, honestly, I felt a lot of those were pretty antiquated,
Hmm.
pretty much
Yeah.
like we've done it this way for 20 years. And so I just wanted to change that, Dave. And as I said, about a year, 15 months ago, set out to do that. And my company is just really focused on that professional franchise development, and then delivering it in different ways. And so Franchise Building Expert has a whole host, a variety of price points, as well as different ways that people can engage our experience. So I think that's the best way to talk about FBE.
Great. And including, things like this. Like thanks for letting us tap into that expertise and cauterize it into this episode. And that's, guys, we're gonna jump right in, but I want to know, Don, from your perspective, as you're coaching a whole bunch of folks in FranDev, what are some of the things that are changing in the landscape of FranDev right now that people need to be paying attention to?
Yeah, I think, Olympic election years are always unique, I think, in franchise sales.
Mhm.
And so I think we're starting to see that. I've always seen about 6 months or so, 6 to 8 months out from the election, things start to go off track, or things start to get hazy or muddy. And what I
Mhm.
mean by that is people I've always believed that people don't care if it's a great economy or a bad economy. They just want to know what is the economy. And with the uncertainty of an election, I think people are uncertain of what's going on. So they don't make, not as many of them make decisions.
Hmm.
In bad economies, I've always felt that strong candidates will still make decisions, and I think that they lean toward franchising in slower or bad economies. And in good economies, a lot of the great people sometimes they just do it on their own and don't even think they need the franchise.
Hmm.
Bad economies, I think, kick out your weaker candidates, and good economies pull in some weaker candidates, but they will go the franchise route because they don't feel they could do it on their own, but they, in a good economy, they feel they can go forward. So, but
Hmm.
the election year throws all of that off because of the uncertainty of what's going to happen after the election. Who's
Hmm.
going to be in? What are the policies and procedures and things going to be like after the election? So I think we're right in that place where we've got that uncertainty starting to formulate, and we're seeing delays. The time to sale is slipping. It's always for me been in the mid 70 days, 75 days. That's been slipping probably, maybe as long out as 100+ days.
Oh, wow.
And I think there's fewer, lead generation is always seems to be a challenge in this industry. 23, 24 years of doing this, but I
Mhm.
think the lead flows are slowing
Yeah.
in some cases, again, because I think there's less people willing to even look right now at starting their own business. So
Right. Yeah, I think, people, savvy investors are seeing things like the potential devaluation of the dollar, the market turmoil. There's a lot there. A lot of tech layoffs kind of precede a lot of the ripple
yeah,
effect. There are big rocks being tossed in the pond right now, and
yeah,
there's
yeah,
a lot of funky noise that I see in the media about, hey, highest consumer satisfaction or purchasing index. I'm like, well, that was a bull crap headline, but like nobody's trying to pump up some good news right now. Where's the red
yeah,
herring? Like, what are they covering up? Like, I don't know, a bit of a skeptic on some of that. But the reality is, I've got clients right now that are working with me that have been very successful with
yeah,
FranDev, and they're very smart, and they can see the writing on the wall and say, hey, even though we've been doing great, we're a little fat and happy, and
yeah,
we want to make sure that we're putting things in place now that will prepare us for a bit of the slowdown and the headwinds that we see happening now. Really respect brands that are that on top of it.
yeah.
So let's talk just a little bit about that.
Dave, I'll interrupt you for 1 second. I think the one last thing I think we've also seen, and it's a pandemic, I think, related thing, was simply that more there are people coming into the market for
Mhm.
franchise ownership that maybe never would have before because they have much less confidence in their employer, having been through the pandemic, and some of them losing their jobs, or some of them downsized or laid off for a while. So I think there's a transition toward semi-absentee ownership, people looking at additional ways to generate wealth. So I think there is a portion of the market that's actually new, people coming in and looking, but they have no sense of urgency. If they are employed still, they have no real sense of urgency, and they don't know what it looks like to own a business or be semi-absentee ownership or have a side gig, if you want to call it that. So sorry to interrupt you, but I think that's another piece of what's going on, what the landscape looks like.
No, well, I'm glad you brought it up. I mean, you're really the expert here, so I'm glad you chimed in and added some extra color there. That's a very good point. And because they're different types of buyers, the 1993 playbook that half the franchise community is playing with right now doesn't really cut it.
Right.
If we can be frank about that, there are a number of things, and guys, love and respect this community. There are a lot of things that are happening that are so old and outdated that it just blows my mind, like some of the
Right.
data people make decisions on, like call every lead in 4 hours. Well, that
Yeah.
wasn't a thing in any industry, 20 until maybe like 1988 to 1993. That was really the plan, right? But everybody's known
Yeah.
since then that you call within 5 minutes. So I
Yeah.
understand. like where some of these things are coming from. So help me dispel some of that today as well as you're
Yeah,
sharing
and
best practices, please.
yeah, and the franchisors are really trying to adjust their models. I mean, I think many franchisors always said, "Oh yeah, you could go passive," or "Oh yeah, you can run this semi-absentee." But you need to run it for a couple of years first. And that's not what the market is asking for right now. So I'm seeing a lot of unique concepts going forward. We'll manage it. We'll be a management company for you.
Hmm.
The gym
Yeah.
industry, I think, has done that for years. Not part of the franchisors, but there have been gym management companies that would come in and run the business, run the gym for an owner. But it's very different. So it's causing the franchisors to have to really look at their model, see can they be semi-absentee, can they do it quicker? What are ways that we can actually sell our brand to the new people coming into the market? So
Yeah. They have money, but not motivation to run something on their own,
that's right.
right? Yeah.
That's right.
And
Yep.
there's also I see a bit of a trend where a lot of people are seeing that that's necessary, so they're relabeling their brand as semi-absentee or absentee, and it's not true. So, I
Correct.
mean, boy,
Correct.
you want a recipe for a 2-year disaster, do that. Sell a bunch of absentee or semi-absentee owners who have to actually run their business, and then watch your numbers drop, and then good
Yeah.
luck with the
Yeah.
item 19 for the next 3 years, right? It's
Yep.
yikes.
Sort of
Wow.
kills your validation there.
Yeah, it sure does. Anyway, that's a bit of a tangent, but yeah,
Yeah.
we're
Yeah. Sorry
to
about
think
that.
about that. No, that was my bad. So, but let's talk about. So, one of the things that's happening though is like we went through this cycle where about mid 2020, franchising just boomed, right? And we've been riding that wave for the last few years, but it's plateaued a bit and even started to backslide. But we've had teams that have gotten a little bit, fat and happy. You stealing one of my customers' words. What are you seeing right now as far as like team motivation and like what are some of the challenges that people are having almost like on the psyche of the franchise sales teams that you've been asked to help with lately?
Yeah, I think the models are being reevaluated. Do you have your salespeople actually going out and generating leads? Are they doing prospecting? I think it's Jeb Blount has a couple of really good books on prospecting, and his belief is that every salesperson needs to always be prospecting. And so I think there's a thing there when salespeople get fat, dumb, and happy,
Mhm.
politely
Yeah.
saying that.
Uh-huh.
I think they're not doing some of those extra things. And I think moving into a softer sales cycle over the next 6 or 8 months, I think people are going to have to do more prospecting and be motivated to do more prospecting. I think one of the other keys is going to be, to me, there's always been two pieces of this FranDev thing. There's the process and there's the prospect. And process, I think, is always really important when you've got a lot of leads. You got a ton of leads coming in, and you need a process to handle them because a bunch of them are tire kickers. A bunch of them are really never going to materialize into anything. So you need part of your process to really be handling the volume. I think what we've got to shift in this year is going to be more into focus on the prospect. When you truly get someone that is serious, that appears to be a good candidate for your brand, um, to have the time and to be focused on the prospect. What do I need to do with this person in order to move them forward, move them to the next step? And I always encourage FranDev people to that, the only thing you need to sell is the next step. Just move people to the next step. And I think the motivation for our FranDev teams is got to be, don't worry so much. Yeah, there's got to be a sale at the end, and that's what we're hoping for. But your objective is to move people through the process. Because the reality is, the longer they stay in the process, the odds are higher there, up to a point. There's a law of diminishing return, but I think up to a certain point. But the longer they're doing more, they're making a commitment to do something else, to go to the next step, to have this phone call, review this FDD, whatever it might be, the longer they're doing that, the more likely they're going to make a positive decision. So I think the shift of leadership and motivation has got to be on, hey, you need to be doing more prospecting,
Mhm.
and you need to be You need to be focused on your candidates more often. You've got to do much more focus on your candidates.
Mhm.
And I'll just throw one other thing out real quick, Dave, is how do you do that? I think the missing piece in most of franchising has been much a weaker look at why are people doing this, and getting emotional with people. I think what I've seen for many years is we focus on the logic. My franchise does X and Y and Z, and we do all of this for you. And so we're focused on the logic and not on the emotion. And reality is 90% of the people we talk to have never done anything like this. They probably don't even know someone who owns a business. They've certainly never looked at business ownership themselves. And so we have to help them get emotional about this. We have to paint the picture of what ownership is going to literally look like. So I don't know if that makes sense or not, but that's what I've seen.
Oh, 100%, yes. And one of the things that I find interesting about what you just said, one, let's summarize a few things. Franchise systems that are going to succeed through some of the turmoil we've got this year, they're going to focus on the prospect and the prospecting, which hasn't been necessary for a couple of years.
Right.
It's been kind of a, hey,
Right.
come on in, almost like the whale, open your mouth and kind of screen some food out and then go sit and digest and enjoy the sun, right? That's
Yep.
kind of been the way we've been the last few years in this industry, but it's going to be more active hunting and finding the right people.
Yes.
And then when you that's your prospecting, but then focusing on the prospect in the funnel to make sure that we're helping them develop an emotional connection to the buying process. And some folks, I love people like, well, that sounds like manipulation, Dave. Well, no, that's actually not it at all. Like if somebody wants to risk their life savings to go and buy a business, get into business for themselves, I think we all owe it to them to understand emotionally and logistically, right? How this is
Yeah.
going to impact them. Like they need to be
Yeah.
emotionally prepared for it. We're doing them a major disservice when they're realizing like I've got to go get a second mortgage on my house to make sure I've got enough cash flow and to manage the deals that I just sold, right?
And I
Like,
think you hit on something. I think we're afraid to go there is because we don't want to get emotional sometimes ourselves. We're afraid to be vulnerable like that. But I mean, I always, I'll just give an example. I would always use the example of when I first started my master franchise for Action Coach. I did it from an office in my house. I had about 500 square feet over my garage,
mhm,
and I remember, and I tell this story. I remember when my wife was working part-time out of the house, and she'd get stuck. She was doing some retailing and merchandise kind of stuff, and she'd get stuck in a Kmart somewhere, and she goes, I'm not going to be in time. I'm not going to be home in time to see the kids get off the bus. So will you please get them their snack and chat with them for a couple minutes and maybe get their homework started. And
mhm,
and I could genuinely emotionally experience that doing that with my prospects. It was so great to have a home-based business because, the kids give you 15 minutes of their excitement about getting home, what
mhm,
they did for the school, and they want a snack. They always want to eat. And it was just so great that in my own business, I could stop and spend 15 or 20 minutes with them. It was the highlights of my day. And,
mhm.
and that's how I would tell the story. And that gets your prospects genuinely engaged. They can see them doing that.
Yeah.
Um, I
Mhm.
always tell my people that we coach and train, I tell them to ask the question why, and at least ask it twice to everything you're talking about. So you say you want to control your own destiny. Why? And what
Mhm.
does that look like? Well, I want to be able to be home, for dinner once in a while, or coach my kids' sports. Well,
Mhm.
why is that? Well, you know what? My dad was a traveling salesman. He left on Monday morning, never got home until Friday, never went to my ball games, never went to my dance recitals, never went to my piano recitals. And I was always the kid whose dad was not on the sidelines rooting me on.
Mhm.
There you go. That's the emotional connection.
Mhm. Yeah, and it's funny that you bring that up because it's overlooked too much. Like we don't understand why people are really buying. Almost every major decision we make is emotionally driven. Uh,
Absolutely.
And bear in mind, guys, I'm not a proponent at all at creating FOMO like that, like or using fear or FUD to
Right.
motivate sales. I think that's the opposite of the way it should be. But helping to understand someone's true motivations,
Yeah.
and how they envision making a change like this will impact their personal, emotional, spiritual, financial life. Like that's really what it's about. What's the impact
Yep.
of this fear, this motivation? And then how does what we're offering, with this great franchise concept going to address that? And if it doesn't, then also being willing to say, hey, look, you're looking for an easy cash flow business. Let's
Yeah.
get you the vending machines. You don't want to own this action coach where you're going to be actively helping build businesses. And like you got to make sure that if you get there on the emotional side, you understand the motives. Then it's actually easier to match them into concepts that will be a cultural and a personality logistical fit.
And be willing to, you have to be willing to tell someone you really need to keep your day job.
Uh huh.
That this is not the right thing for you to do at this time, at least anyway, based on what you're seeing and what you're hearing. Yeah, I absolutely not trying to not trying to monkey around with people's emotions to get them to buy. I think it was I have Jeffrey Gitomer's a friend and a mentor of mine, and I think it's Jeffrey who always said that professional selling is helping people buy, and that's what you're trying to do if it's the right thing for them to do. If it's not the right thing for them to do, you got to step away and go, I really don't think this is for you.
Mhm. Yeah, and frankly, it'll be better. You'll be better for it, and also you'd be surprised. I've had a number of times, not FranDev, right, but just in the software world I live in, uh, telling people, "Hey, you don't need me."
Right, right.
Those are the same people that sometimes bring their friends over to meet me at conference and say, "Hey, this is the only guy who ever told me the truth. Like, you need his help." And like, it's not anyway. That feels self-aggrandizing. I don't mean it to, but like,
No, no.
you'll be surprised how being honest with people and doing the right thing for them brings back to you success, and you'll
Yeah,
sleep better.
and I live my faith in my business, and you and I have talked many times about our faith in our business, and I believe you don't have to be have a deep faith. You just do things with integrity,
Hmm.
and I think if you do things with integrity, I think that's attractive.
Hmm.
I think people will come to you if you're willing to tell someone I'm not the right business for you, I'm not the right supplier for you, or this isn't the right thing to do in the long run. My belief is it comes back around to you in some fashion, not
Yeah,
with that person or that particular situation, but in some other way, if you're always doing the right thing.
yeah, agreed with you. I agree with you on that one. That sounds like a podcast in and of itself. So, but I want to talk about the third leg of the stool that we talked about. So the prospecting, right? But let's talk about the process for a minute. You'd mentioned that being a key part of this. Where do we need to focus on the process right now? Where do brands struggle a little bit? Where are brokers, consultants struggling? Like, how does the process need to shift from where it's been for the last 30 years? Because it doesn't feel like it's changed a whole lot in this
Yeah,
industry.
you hit on it a little bit earlier, and we've and this is not to self promote you guys per se, but I think speed to lead and knowing your conversion rates from step to step, knowing legitimately how many leads should I actually be able to get on the phone? How many should I really be able to engage in a conversation? And that varies. What people don't realize is that that varies based on the lead source. If you're a franchisor and and you get a lead from a consultant, the reality is, really 100% of those should show up because they've been teed up and that now they don't, but 90% of those should show up for those first calls. Now, if you're purchasing leads, and again, not disparaging portals, but if you're purchasing leads, the reality is those are tire kickers. Somebody was surfing the net at 1 a.m. in the morning and said, yeah, I want information on these 5 brands. And they'll never return your phone call. You'll never get those people. And so you just have to realize certain lead sources will have different conversion rates into actually speaking to people.
Mhm.
And I think monitoring those in the process, you've got to know what are good conversion rates from step to step. Again, that's why I kind of hinted at that earlier. I can look at people's KPIs and dive into an area. I'll know what the good percentages are.
Yeah.
and I'll be able to dive into that area and say, you need to work this, you need to do this or do that based on whatever they've told me, and you need to work this step because your conversions are not, they're not the right percentage that you should be getting. And
Yeah.
I think that's something will really going to be important this year, because again, fewer people in the funnel, you've got to be sure the right ones are moving through your process, that you're not losing something from step to step that you could control.
Hmm. Yeah, I know. I love it. I think speed to lead is interesting. We talked about before. You'd mentioned time, like the amount of time they spend actively engaged in the buying process is directly correlated with success on the other end of the
Yeah.
sales funnel, right?
Yeah.
There's a corollary to that. The other edge of the sword is time kills all deals,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So I think was it spin? I forget where the advance versus continue the sales concept comes from. I've just been talking about it for so long, but a lot of people are pretty content to keep like touching base with someone and not advancing them through a process. Like I think that being able to monitor how long are people sitting in the stages of your
Yes.
sales cycle, and being able to know what a healthy value is, and then monitoring people that are falling outside of that, and also like you're saying conversion rates. I can within about 90 seconds I can pop into an account, and I can see where they got a problem, like
Yeah.
because you can see that conversion rate data across their sales milestones. Now you don't
Yeah.
have to use a ClientTether solution, right? If you can figure out how to get that in another platform, but
Yeah.
like being able to monitor that, even if it's in a spreadsheet, so you can say, man, my conversion rate from a new lead in to a booked first meeting is 25%. I'll tell
Yeah.
you right now, it's not very good. So it should be better than that.
Correct.
And if
Correct.
it isn't better than that, then you know I need to focus on this part of my sales cycle and figure out how to double that number. And
And the quality of the pipeline, I think this is something I talk a lot about, the quality of the pipeline, and it's subjective. I have to admit, but there are key components going on in the quality of your pipeline. If you're not moving them forward at a decent pace for them to close in, let's say, 90 days,
mhm,
if they're at step two of a 10-step process, 75 days in, they're not going to buy. So get them out,
yeah,
get them out. So salespeople, development people can get this real false sense of, hey, I've got 18 people in my pipeline, but not one of them maybe is a good one that might buy. And so I always look at, the emotional parts, what's their dissatisfaction? There's negative emotions that would move somebody forward. There's vision and positive factors. And then I look at the franchise concept. That's the logic part of it. So 80% emotion, maybe 20% logic, but look at the quality of your pipeline based on those things. And if they're not emotionally attached and engaged and working with you, you're not finding out the real emotional pieces on the vision or the dissatisfaction, then if most of your candidates are weak over there, they could love your concept and they're still not going to buy.
mhm,
They're really just not
mhm,
going to buy. So
yeah,
it's subjective, but I try to rank. I've always tried for years to kind of rank the quality of my pipeline to see legitimately how many of these are going to move through and make a decision, and
mhm.
how many of them are not. And I try to get people out of my pipeline in 2, maybe 3 weeks, so that I'm not spending 2 months with them to find out they're really not interested.
Yeah, yeah, and if you find yourself being the chaser and they're not keeping commitments and following up, it's a good person to put into a long-term nurturing drip because they're not ready today. Like you have to be emotionally okay with that concept that it's
Yeah.
not you, that it's them, and sometimes it's you, right? If you're not a very good sales guy, but
That's
to be fair, but like it's really like you got to be comfortable enough to go get the next one and work and focus on the ones in the pipe and develop and build and let people out.
Yeah,
Um,
if you get them out quicker, the ones that shouldn't be in there, you really have much more time for the right ones. And
yeah.
that's what I always try to do. Be sure I've got a lot of time for the serious candidates, and I'm not just spinning my wheels with anybody that kind of comes along.
Yeah, it's I call it the salad metaphor, right? Like I need to get all the lettuce out of the way so I can find the bacon and the eggs that are in my Cobb salad, right? It's,
Yeah.
get the leads out quick that aren't good. Now,
Yeah, absolutely.
Don, you've got some unique insights and perspectives because you coach people all day long. Like what would you say right now are some of the topics and obviously, not sharing anything too personal, but what are some of the topics and challenges that you're seeing happening among the many clients that you're coaching that we might need to spend a few minutes on together today?
Yeah, I think a lot of times the people with less than a couple of years in the business, if they haven't been mentored, and they haven't had somebody looking over their shoulder, they really honestly they just don't know what to do next when they see certain situations.
Mhm.
And and uh, so so um I my sales in my master franchise year two over year one was up 600% because I had this person situationally helping me prospect by prospect. So what I'm seeing when I do some of those things is one of the things is the dynamics. Again, if it's a consultant lead, because I'm working a lot with BAI and working a lot with their consultants nowadays, training and coaching. It's that communication between the developer, the FranDev rep, or the franchisor
Mhm.
and the consultant. Their people just don't spend the time there, Dave. That's necessary. When I was a master, 23% of my sales were from consultant leads. But when I looked at that, I'd say 80% of them were from two particular consultants because we built up a relationship. I was joking with you offline about sitting at the sushi bar and talking to some Japanese ladies, and but I was with a certain organization, and I would go. We'd get together once a quarter. We'd break bread together, so to speak, and we just understood each other. And I learned a lot from them about how to sell franchises. And then I followed those systems. But the level of communication was very high.
Mhm.
Um, the one of the other things I see is sometimes, again, it's a broker thing, but they don't know the inventory that well. They'll be throwing out ideas to their candidates, and oh, this one might be one you're interested in, and so the franchisors need to do a better job, but not always just the big. You have a once or twice a year time with all the brokers. Get one on one with the brokers that you think could, or particularly if you're getting territory checks, get one on one with those people that are doing the territory checks. I
Mhm.
mean, as some of our private clients, we call every territory check to make sure they not just, oh, do you have our 2-minute drill, but it's really, hey, I've got 3 or 4 key points about presenting us. If you really want to present better, give me 5 minutes. And 2 out of 3 people, brokers will call me back
Mhm.
because they want to know what are those 2 or 3 people. No, what are those 2 or 3 key items? So know your inventory, and if you are a ZOR, help individually help those brokers get to know your brand better.
Mhm.
You want to get on the broker's short lists, if you will. So
Yeah.
I think those are a couple things. Hope that answered the question, Dave.
Yeah, especially from the consultant perspective, it's funny how well aligned we are around that. That's one thing I coach. We work with a lot of consultants and brokers and brands on FranDev, and on the broker side, I always make sure to take a couple minutes and make sure they know you've got to get to know your brands as well. I
Yeah,
mean, not just understand the inventory itself, but like understand who's got the catcher's mitt on over
yeah.
there, right? And to the savvy consultants, they know who doesn't even have the mitt on their hand, who's like, in left field chasing butterflies. So when they send leads over, they're not gonna get followed up on. And I'm not saying that's a real common thing, but there are some brands that have they got so much going on, they just, they let it sit on a pile for 2 weeks and they'll get to it when they can. Like, and
Well,
that's not the partner that I would want to work at as with a
that's
consult.
right. And sometimes you've got to give them some grace. They might be new, but
Yeah.
as a broker, I'll push my ZOR or the rep for my ZOR once in a while and say, look, the only thing holding this up is they haven't completed they haven't seen the FDD yet. What are you waiting for? I say that in a polite way,
Of
but
course, of course, yeah.
ZORs have to recognize sometimes their people need to be more on top of some of these things. And again, these are the kinds of things, circling
Mhm.
back to what we started
Process.
talking about.
Yeah.
These are some of the things you've really got to be on top of in an economy like we're probably going to experience, for the next 6 months. You
Mhm.
gotta you gotta be on top of all the small details to keep the fewer amount that's in your pipeline, keep them moving forward.
Right, and let's flip the script for just a minute because now from the franchisor perspective, right? Like, there are some challenges that they have on the other side of the coin, but they have their processes sometimes, even though they work with a lot of brokers and folks like that, they don't have really solid processes in place to engage the brokers, to follow up on the deals that they send in, to give them updates on where the candidates are in the flow. But boy, if you're a franchisor and you're on top of that level of detail with your consultants, what is the impact on that consultant's mind share of your brand?
Yeah.
Like, that's the
Yeah.
thing that you've got to own, right? Like, people want to own real estate on a busy highway where there's a lot of traffic. Franchisors need to own the mind share of the franchise consultants that are getting a lot of traffic, right? It's the same
Absolutely.
concept. So, what have you seen work well there? I mean, from being on both sides of the house.
Yeah, it's keeping the keeping your franchisor pages and your data information. I get that all the time about, hey, is your site up to date? Um, I would use video. One of the things, and again, Jeffrey Gitomer said to me a couple of years ago, is, hey, the next 10 years is all about video. And I think that's been really proven out.
Mhm,
So Zors, get testimonials from your franchisees. Make your even pieces of your process. Make it. Be sure your brokers see these things. Be sure your prospects see these things,
mhm,
and not long things. I remember. I won't mention the brand, but I remember I was just doing a secret shopping, not on a competitor, but just on a brand. Just what's their process? Fairly well known brand. And one of the times I got texted like an 18-minute, 20-minute video from their CEO. It was too early in the process. I wasn't going to give them 20 minutes of my time. So the timing of the videos, the length of the videos, these are things that if you're going to do it, do it recognizing how engaged is your prospect or your candidate. I
mhm,
would say that working with candidates is it's kind of like thinking about running. I used to run cross country a little bit, and it's kind of like running cross country. And there's two axes. There's excitement and interest and knowledge, and there's time. At the beginning, you can't throw a bunch of stuff at them because they don't have any real interest. They don't have a lot of knowledge. They're not going to give you a lot of their time. But
mhm,
eventually, somewhere along the line, the curve starts to go up because now you've pulled them in. They are starting to engage. You can expect more of them later in the process. You can give them more to do. You can give them those longer videos because they're more invested now. They're more engaged. And I love to do that so that toward the cross country analogy was I had just run 12 miles. I got one more mile left and I can see the finish line.
mhm,
And I actually could work up a sprint to get to that finish line. And that's what we want to do with these candidates. We
mhm,
want to get them we want the flow of stuff, the flow of information, and the expectations of them to just keep increasing till they get to decision time or getting close to the finish line. They're
mhm.
sprinting to you to say, where do I sign? I want to join your vision. I want to join your brand. So that's the way I look at it.
Yeah, I love that. That's a great analogy. And one of the things that it reminds me of that we chatted about before, and maybe we end on this note as well, Don, is situational sales coaching. Like understanding like where people are in your process, and also understanding where they're on those two axes. How excited are they? How far down the
Exactly.
process are they? What advice would you give for a franchisor that's trying to coach a sales team, a franchise development team, to be more aware of these things and to manage that better? What are a couple of tips you'd give on that front?
Yeah, I would look at the things that, and again, I do this in my group coaching. We look at the candidates that are what should be close to closing. What step are they in the process, and how many days are they in the process? And so, if those two things are looking like they should be making a decision in 3 or 4 weeks, I teach what I used to call a checklist mindset or a checklist selling. I would say to the candidate, okay, you've got to do A, B, and C. That's what's left to do, correct? And I
Mhm,
get them to validate, yeah, that's all I have left to do. So they don't bring something else in later on to just delay the decision. And then each time I'm with them, with that particular candidate, I'm saying, okay, you just finished A. Now you only have B and C left to do, correct? And by the way, when are you doing B and when are you doing C? So
Mhm.
I would be working my pipelines with my sales teams just like that. I'd be saying, where are they in the process? How many days or weeks have they been in the process? What step are they in? If I've got 8 steps in my process, what step are they in? And then I'd be diving in with the salespeople. When are they doing the next step? That's what I'm always focused on with my coaching clients. What's the next step? When are they going to do it?
Yeah.
And that's what I'd be doing with people this year, very, very much this year.
Yeah, I love well, I went through a year-long sales training. I've been through a lot of them over the years. But there was this one I went through and it wasn't particularly great, but there was one thing they just harped on and harped on and harped on, and it really just it seared it into my soul, which is you got to schedule the next event, schedule the next
Yes,
appointments,
yes, yes,
have a deadline for when people plan on doing things, and it's important. Like they want that too. They want the clarity on what needs to happen next. They want
yeah.
the clarity on when should we be getting together and what will we be doing at that point. So I love that advice, guys. Don Shin, obviously you can tell has a lot to offer and some great insights. What's the best way for people to find you in FBE, Don?
Yeah, you could go to franchisebuildingexpert.com. Our website's not terrific. We're gonna overhaul it this year. Also, I mostly use LinkedIn.
Mhm.
My last name is Schin, so Don Shin on LinkedIn. A lot of resources on there, of podcast connections and other posts that I do and things. So I almost use my LinkedIn profile, honestly, almost more than I use a website.
Mhm.
So those are 2 best places.
Nice. Well, that's going to be easy to remember, guys. Um, Don Shin on LinkedIn, right? And Don, we appreciate you. Thanks so much for joining us and sharing some insights with us today.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me, Dave.